My name's Jim Corpola. I'm a 1987 graduate of the United States Military Academy. I'm going to moderate today. We have Petty Officer Shelby Lowe. She's here for Naval ROTC, but I think she's going to be our only ROTC representative, so she'll be our subject matter expert for ROTC. We have 3 cadets here from the United States Military Academy. They are currently on exchange to Air Force. That is a program that the academies all participate in. We have Landon Coker, Spencer Bush, and Lauren Guth. They are going to have great current information, certainly about West Point, but can talk to you in general about the academies. Bob O'Rourke is a 1967 graduate of the Naval Academy. 1867. Rich Paul is a 1988 graduate of West Point. Dwayne Romero, my classmate. I'm just going to pinch hit. It's my turn to moderate. But before we get into our presentation, it's always great to see young people here. Who has a relative, a close relative, uncle, parent, cousin who served? Raise your hand. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. Obviously this is a different path than your standard college path, whether you're going ROTC to an academy, or even if you want to enlist. We can handle some of those questions too. Really happy to see you all here. Let's see, I'm just going to do a quick high school survey because I love to know the Western Slope high schools that are in attendance. So, okay, I see a couple Basalt guys. Basalt, raise your hand. Awesome. I see a couple Aspen guys. Aspen, raise your hand. I know we got Eagle Valley here. Awesome. Let's see, anybody from the Durango area? Awesome. Way to go. Traveled far. Anybody coming from Vail in that area? Edwards. Woohoo. Way to go. Moffat County, coming down from Craig. Anybody? Meeker. Sweet. Excellent. Anybody from the Grand Junction area? I missed that. Grand Junction area. Palisade, Parachute. Awesome. So if I missed your high school, apologies. Glenwood, of course. Oh, Glenwood, can't forget the Demons. Yeah, that's another one. Seniors, raise your hand. Yeah, you're getting down the wire and figuring this out. Juniors, raise your hand. Awesome. Sophomores. Any freshmen? Really getting ahead of it? All right. Just so just to kind of set the table before I hand this over. Seniors, if you're really interested in an academy, hopefully you're deep into the process by this point. If you're just getting started, you're a little behind the 8 ball. Not impossible, but here we are on October 1st, and a lot of that admissions work is already rolling. The academies, as most of you may be aware, and those of you who've done your homework, there's kind of 2 silos you got to work on. Getting a nomination, and that's through a local congressman or your senator. And then you got to handle the academy itself, its own admission process. 2 things you kind of have to go through. And if you're only getting started on October 1, you got to hurry up and giddy up. ROTC, different timeline. And Petty Officer Lowe is going to get you some answers on that. I feel like I've spoken enough, and so I'm going to hand this off. Let's start off with ROTC, if that's okay. And again, this is just for recording.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am Petty Officer Lowe. I am the ROTC coordinator for Colorado and a bunch of other states as well. So if you're interested in ROTC, if you're interested in the military at all, I highly recommend applying for all of the ROTCs and all of the academies that you're interested in. The worst thing that can happen is multiple services accept you and you get to choose which route that you want to go. So it does not hurt to apply to all of them. So as far as deadlines go for NROTC, the applications open up April 1st of your junior year, and they're going to close. The deadline is January 31st of your senior year. I highly recommend not waiting until January 31st because the first board, at least for Navy ROTC, is mid-October, and there's 10 boards throughout the season. So the sooner you apply, the better. You're going to have more views on your application, and you're competing with less people because most people procrastinate until the deadline to apply. So apply early, don't wait. The scholarship requirements to apply. So if you take the SAT, the minimum required score is 1100. You have to have at least 540 in math and 550 in English. And then for the ACT, it's kind of weird. We actually don't look at your composite at all. So for the math, you have to have at least a 21 and your English has to be at least 22. Those two scores combined must equal at least 44. So that is not your composite, that is math and English combined. We do not require ASVAB for ROTC. I'll touch on the Marines and what they require in just a second. So those are the test requirements, but we do also want you to be a well-rounded applicant. So yes, academics are a part of it, but we want the whole package. So we want you to be involved in sports and community service and leadership positions and school clubs, etc. So the different hats that you can wear while still maintaining good GPA and stuff would be ideal. That's going to make you look more competitive. Also, if you are applying to multiple service academies or ROTC programs, that's going to help your application under the propensity to serve section. So that'll give you some bonus points. There's also something called dual tracking that you can do. So if you know that no matter what happens, you want to serve in the Navy, you can dual track where you still work with me, your coordinator, to submit your application, and Naval Academy or anything else you're interested in. You can still work with the enlisted recruiter, go up to MEPS, pick a job, ship date, bonuses, anything that applies. The Navy cannot and will not ship you to Navy boot camp until you get a yes or a no on every single ROTC application and military application you have out. So should you go officer, we shred your contract, tell you congratulations, you go that route. Should you not, you still can go enlisted and still apply for officer programs from within. That also will give you bonus points on your application. So that's dual tracking. ROTC compared to the academies, I always hear that the academies are a great place to be from, not a great place to be in. It's very strenuous in the academies. It is a phenomenal time, don't get me wrong. It's very prestigious, it's awesome, but you are going to be eating, breathing, sleeping, dreaming Naval Academy or the other academies that you go to. Don't be confused on that because that's a fact. Whereas ROTC, it's a lot easier to get into. It's not easy, but it is easier to get into and it's going to be a lot less strenuous. So unlike the academies, for ROTC, you can expect to have a pretty typical college experience with about 8 hours per week. You'll be wearing your uniform, PTing with your unit, taking a couple of naval science classes, but again, pretty typical college experience. And then 4 weeks of your summer are going to be spent doing what we call summer cruises. This is a paid internship, so you're going to get paid to go shadow whatever officer community that you're interested in. You can shadow a different one every time. You don't have to choose your officer pipeline for certain until junior year of college. So that's the summer cruises. We do award 85% of our scholarships to STEM degrees. So anything STEM is going to have a higher chance for selection. Tier 3 degrees is anything that's not STEM. So art, history, poli-sci, etc. 15% of our scholarships will go to that. Let's see, what else should you know? The first year of the scholarship is actually a freebie year. You can do the entire freshman year and then disenroll, decide, no, this isn't for me. And you owe nothing back to the Navy in money or time served until the first day of sophomore year. At that point, should you withdraw, then you either owe back the money the Navy paid for your tuition, or you owe 2 years back to duty service in any of the branches. So first year of college is a freebie year. As far as the application process, the online application is only part of the process. That is, it'll take you about 2 hours to complete. So once you fill out the online application, you hit submit. I can start working on scheduling your officer interview. We normally reach out to your top university that you want to go to, and I'll reach out to them to schedule your interview. So you'll have the online application, your officer interview. You're going to have your AFA, which is the applicant fitness assessment. So for the Navy, that's just going to be a 1 mile run, as many push-ups as you can do in 2 minutes, and holding a plank for at least a minute and a half. I know, not that difficult. So that's your AFA, and then there'll be a couple of forms that I will email you. You sign and return back to me. You'll also email me your test scores, and then I worry about getting your transcripts. I get your teacher evaluations. So that's basically the process for applying for ROTC. It's a lot simpler than the academies where you need all these nominations and all that kind of stuff. So that is ROTC in a nutshell. To touch on the Marine side of things. Okay, so if you are interested in applying for ROTC, Navy option and Marine option, for the application purposes, you do have to choose one or the other. Because the Marines are a department of the Navy, we have the same ROTC program. So when you're applying, you will have to choose which branch you want to choose. However, after the first year of your program, you can actually choose to switch over to the other side. So Navy can go Marines, Marines can switch over to Navy. The difference between applying for those two, obviously the Navy is going to care way more about your brains than we do your bronze, and opposite for the Marines. So, as we all know, it's true though. Unless you're trying to be a Navy SEAL, then you need both of them. You need the brains and the bronze. All right. So as far as the difference in requirements for the Marines, for the SAT, whereas Navy is 1,100, Marines is 1,000. And then for ACT, they do look at the composite. So you need a 22 on the composite for the ACT. You can also take the ASVAB. If you get a 74 on the ASVAB, that will qualify you. And then obviously their fitness test is going to be way harder than ours. So 200 on the PFT. I don't know what that means. So you will take a 3-mile run. You are going to do a plank, and then they're going to test your max pull-ups. So that will be their fitness test. The Marine scholarship is 180, whereas the Navy is 200,000. I'm not sure why that's different. But yeah, it'll be the same schools that you can choose from with the Navy. There is a website I can send you. It'll have all the NROTC schools listed on there. There's over 168 you can choose from, and that will include Ivy League schools like Harvard and Cornell as well. So yeah, that is basically the Marine program. They're not as picky about what you major in. So if you wanted to major in business or poli-sci, but you have phenomenal PT scores, you probably want to look more towards the Marines. Whereas if you're looking more for a STEM degree and maybe your physical side is a little less, or even if it's not, we want strong and smart people as well. So, but if your score is a bit higher, I would recommend looking into the Navy side. And remember, you can switch after that first year. So the ROTC programs are pretty similar as far as the application process goes. The Air Force, I know, does have a higher requirement for the SAT and ACT. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but as far as the application process goes, it's pretty similar across all the branches. They will vary as far as which schools have the ROTC programs for that branch. I know the only one for the Navy in the state of Colorado is CU Boulder. So, yep, I think that's all that I need to mention about the ROTC programs. Are we? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Army ROTC, and most of those thresholds and criteria you described are internally consistent.
Mm-hmm.
You did mention the 85%, 15%.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's an interesting. That's a distribution of you want a lot of STEM.
Yes.
And a lot of public, liberal arts and public affairs.
Right.
It's a little bit more balanced, I think, in the Army ROTC.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned the $150,000 and the $200,000 threshold.
So Navy's 200,000, Marine is 180.
But isn't there flexibility?
And the Marine, yeah, I do believe there is flexibility in their scholarship. I don't know how that necessarily works.
But if you win Navy ROTC, for example, at Harvard,
Yeah.
the annual tuition, I think that's really flex.
Yes. And actually, I forgot to mention on that note, thank you. You can put that $200K towards the tuition or the room and board. And there are actually a couple of universities that will also waive the room and board, or they'll provide other financial aid in other ways as well. So I can send you that list of schools that waive the room and board and provide other financial benefit as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
And then you're mentioning the boards.
Mm-hmm.
That's internally consistent. It's like
Okay.
you said,
Perfect.
earlier the better.
Yes.
The better. So like right here, right now, if you're a senior, you want to get on.
Yep. Absolutely. And while it's mandatory to have the evaluation from the math teacher and then any other teacher or coach of your choice, and then the counselor, you can have anyone in your life write a normal letter of recommendation for you. We can always submit that as additional information. Just make sure they date it and put a wet signature on it, and then we can accept that. So I think that's it for the ROTC programs.
So the format I wanted to follow is just kind of have this panel just kind of give you the information like Petty Officer Lowe just did. So I'm going to hand it over to Bob to talk about Naval Academy. I'll talk some overview about West Point, probably get some color commentary from Rich. And then we'll open the floor to questions. The West Point cadets are going to be a great source of information, even if you're interested in Navy and Air Force in terms of the Academy, because they've very recently been through the admissions process and can talk to that in much better detail than I think any of us can. So going to have our Naval Academy representative just speak briefly about Navy. Then I'm going to speak about West Point, hopefully get some color commentary from Rich. And then we're going to open the floor for questions. Really, that's, this format's usually most valuable. You come up with questions, the answers, then give everybody an idea of what's going on.
So, are we going to show the video on the timeline?
If you've got it and you can cue that, I think that's useful. Go ahead.
if you guys haven't heard of the name Johnny Kim, that is not only a naval officer, but he's a naval SEAL, a naval doctor, a naval flight surgeon, and a NASA astronaut. So dream big. Don't let anyone tell you no. And if you're interested in aviation, all I got to say is Navy Blue Angels and Top Gun.
I'm going to change themes just a little bit because I think you cover a lot of the application information pretty well. And so far as timelines and what you need to do when, that's pretty much available online. And from the standpoint of the Naval Academy, and I think also West Point, we've got literature down at our booths, that can show you what exactly you need to do. And many of you, I think, I've already spoken to from the standpoint of the timelines of the Naval Academy. And they're very similar for West Point and Air Force. And I should also point out for Coast Guard and, the Merchant Marine Academies. What I'd like to do is just talk about why would you go to the Naval Academy? Because the type of person we're looking for is the same kind of person that we're looking for at West Point and Air Force. So it really depends on what you see yourself doing during your undergraduate work, but also primarily what job do you want to do when you graduate? And from the standpoint of the Naval Academy, we graduate about 1,000 officers a year. 75% of them go in the Navy. The other 25% go in the Marine Corps. A lot of people don't realize that the Marine Corps is part of the Navy Department. We're not part of the Navy, we're part of the Navy Department. And of the 750 who go in the Navy, probably about 250 go on ships, surface warfare officers. And they can serve in the engineering department, they can operations, gunnery, missile technology, high-tech stuff on board a Navy ship. About 39 go aboard submarines. And so you get selected for the nuclear power program, and you go aboard some of the most highly advanced systems in the world today. And there are other military occupational specialties you can go into in the Navy, as well as Marine intelligence, for example. These, as you can imagine, majors like data science, computer science are exceptionally important regardless of whether you go in the Navy, whether you go in the Marine Corps, or you go in the Army or the Air Force. So cyber, all these things, we offer majors in those, as well as standard engineering, math, science, and what have you. Some liberal arts, languages, history, and those things. But everything is, everybody gets a STEM education. One other thing I should point out is that between the Navy Air and Marine Air, we have probably the top 5 air forces in the world. Of the 750 who go in the Navy, over 250 go aviation. So you're pounding off the deck of an aircraft carrier, an F-18, or you're flying C-130s, or you're flying helicopters. In the Marine Corps, we have helicopters, we have fixed wing, we fly F-18s, we fly OV-22 Ospreys. And the Marine Corps at one point had about 600 combat aircraft. In my case, when I graduated from the Naval Academy, I went into the infantry in Vietnam, was a rifle platoon leader. And when I got back, got out of the hospital, I got smart and went aviation and flew A4 Skyhawks. For the simple reason was those guys went home and ate hot chow every night. They had more money than I did, and they had a smile on their face. When the infantry, we didn't smile a whole lot. So the point I'm trying to make, and I'll turn it over here real fast, is that it depends on what you want to do, what you see yourself doing. But all the jobs, starting from the Naval Academy, and I'll speak for West Point, Air Force, and what have you, they're all exciting jobs. They pay pretty well. They're pretty demanding, and you get phenomenal responsibility from the day you step away from the service academy. So it's pretty hard to beat a service academy education. And that's not to take anything away from the ROTC program, which is a phenomenal program in its own right. We're lucky to have the ROTC program. I think they probably supply most of our officers. And that's an important point to keep in mind. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to echo a couple comments that Petty Officer Lowe made and Bob made about the kind of profile you're going to try to build as a high school student if you're targeting ROTC or the academy, at one of the academies. So, and these are some of the same questions we're answering down at the booth. Grades are obviously important, and you heard some of those thresholds on test scores. But if you're one-dimensional as a student, if you're top of your class and you're kicking butt on those tests, but you don't have any extracurriculars, you're not putting together a great profile. Obviously, the grades are huge, but you could be maybe slightly lower on the grades and a captain of a football team or wrestling team or soccer team, an athlete, student politics, student body, honor society, working, the academies, and I think ROTC would, if you're working on a farm, the academies and ROTC put a lot of weight into that because you're having to manage things outside of just school. So think about, when you think about your high school profile and putting your kind of resume together, get out there and do stuff, beyond just your grades. Those things are huge that build your kind of high school resume for your application. And I would say, be students who are student body president and captain of a team and 3-letter athletes, pretty darn attractive to the academies in ROTC, and probably more so than a straight A student who doesn't have any of that other stuff. I'm sure the cadets can validate that. That has not changed. That's just something to think about. If you're interested in this path, build a very complete resume on top of your academics. So that applies to Air Force, Army, Navy, ROTC. I'm not going to get into great detail about West Point other than, it's similar to the other academies. We don't have the massive aviation opportunities. So, all you want to be pilots. We don't have much fixed wing, but if you want to get in a helicopter, we're your service. We don't get you on a boat very often. However, if you, are interested.
That's happened, actually.
I know.
The Army does have more boats.
I know.
Transportation Corps.
But they don't
Yeah.
have many ships.
But, in terms of leadership, West Point likes to think of itself as the premier leadership development service academy, but we support the other academies, except for 2 Saturdays during the fall. Dwayne and I can speak for him, I know we spent a lot of time talking to kids, helping them prep. I spent more time prepping kids for Air Force and Navy than West Point, unfortunately, but super happy when anyone chooses that path. So anybody here who wants to go to any of those, we're all a resource for any of those paths, and except for those 2 Saturdays. So I think we can probably. Did you have anything you want to add before we start taking questions?
Well, the only thing I was going to add is, looking back on it now, I'm 35 years out of the academy. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made. I traveled the world. There were so many opportunities for things to do at West Point, curriculum to choose, and then you get your branch choice coming out of the academy, and there's 18 different branches you could choose. And I served 21 years in the military police corps, traveled the world, jumped out of airplanes and helicopters and did all that fun stuff. And that was an eye-opening experience for me, a kid from small town Pennsylvania, where our town was just 1,000 people and the closest McDonald's was 35 miles away. It opened my eyes to everything this world has to offer. And I wouldn't change that for a bit. So.
I think Shelby just mentioned the nomination process. I'm going to hand it to one of the cadets. Hopefully I'll get one of the 3 to volunteer to talk about how to secure a congressional or senatorial, or even less likely, do we have any presidential nominations here? Yeah, that's very rare. We do. To talk about that, because that is a unique aspect of getting into one of the academies. I talked about it a little bit beginning, but you should be able to just grab that mic and go for it.
All right, so that's what's going to distinguish the service academies from ROTC is you're going to have to get that nomination from a congressional or a presidential authority. Most people are going to get them from your congressional authority. Every state has obviously your 2 senators, and I highly suggest you apply to all your sources or potential sources of a nomination. So you'll apply, if you guys are all from Colorado, you'll apply for our 2 Colorado senators, and then you'll apply for your district representative. Mine was Negus, and I got a nomination to the Naval Academy from him, and then when Gardner was in office, he was the one that gave me my West Point nomination. So apply to all of those sources, because that can be what's going to keep you out of the academy. It can be, but that also doesn't mean that it's impossible to get one of those. It's just a step that you got to take. The vice presidential is going to be a little bit harder because they get the same amount of slots, but obviously everybody in the country can apply for the vice presidential one. And there's a presidential nomination source, but that is usually just for, pretty much. Yeah, very specific circumstances, but still look into that, see if you qualify for it, apply to all of those sources, especially for all of you in here that are from Colorado and want to go to the Air Force Academy. Just know everybody in Colorado wants to go to the Air Force Academy. Okay? So getting that nomination is actually going to be especially hard for you if you're trying to go to the Air Force Academy and you're from Colorado. That's just something to note.
Yeah, you'll notice there's no Air Force Academy rep up here. They think it's a foregone conclusion that you will all want to go there and they don't need to sell it.
All right, just something to note with the nomination process. So I can speak to kind of the recruited side. I ran Division I cross country and track at West Point for a year and was a recruited athlete, but that happened after I'd already got my nominations and my actual appointment. So I can kind of speak to both paths. So if you're a recruited athlete, there are a few extra options as far as nomination process and things like that. And if you end up being recruited, your coaches will help you through that. That is, and it's the same for the Naval Academy and Air Force, I assume. But the academies do have Division I programs, so that is something. If you're a good athlete, there is some extra routes to getting in if you don't get that initial nomination from your congressman or senator. But again, if you're a competitive applicant, the easiest way through everything is probably academically. Just go through your congressman, your senator. You can get nominations multiple academies. I got one for my senator, and I got one for my congressman. So that is a route. If you're competitive, you can get multiple.
So I'd just like to add one more thing we haven't talked, because they're not represented here. In the past, they had been, and that's Coast Guard, as well as the Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York. And the Coast Guard Academy is, if you, the Coast Guard Academy, if you're interested in the sea, but also if you're interested in aviation. Some of those white knuckle flying the Coast Guard does at night in a helicopter on choppy seas and bad weather, rescuing people. And so if you're interested in aviation, all the service academies can lead you to that role, except for the Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point. But the Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, you get commissioned from there. You can get a reserve commission in the Navy, and you can go on active duty from the Navy. There are a number, and all the people from Kings Point who wind up in the Navy, surprisingly enough, also in the Marine Corps. We have some Kings Point graduates. So don't overlook those two federal academies. Coast Guard's under Homeland Security, and the Merchant Marine is under some administration, Maritime Administration, or something like Department of Commerce. Yeah, thank you very much. So don't overlook those as well, as I think everybody has said. Apply to all the service academies if you think the job afterwards is something you think you'd like to do, okay? They're all outstanding schools.
And one thing I'd want to note on that, if you get into one service academy and then in your time decides you want to go do something in a different service, there is a thing called cross commissioning, where you essentially switch spots with a graduate from another academy. For example, I had a friend last year that cross commissioned into the Air Force from West Point. So that is a potential.
I'm gonna, when you have a question, just raise your hand. I'm gonna bring this so that it gets recorded. So, sir, you have your hand up.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. Did you say if you go to Kings Point, then you can actually go to any of the branches? Or is that just from the Kings Point? Yes, sir. Okay.
It's a neat little school. It's a beautiful location in Long Island Sound. Yeah.
When do you recommend the kids to start to go to their senators and congressmen. I mean, you say before, you know, they have to apply their junior year. April 1st is the beginning of that thing. Do you recommend them going to their, like, my child's a sophomore, he's in here over there, but do you recommend that?
So for West Point specifically, the application to apply doesn't even open until the spring of your junior year. And there are some things you can get on pretty quickly. So if the academy is the route you want to go, your life will be easier the earlier you start. But for nominations, there's a pretty streamlined process for each representative. And a lot of those don't actually get turned in until the beginning of your senior year of high school. Usually due that first weekend of October. If you look at their websites, a lot of the times that's where they like show you where to apply. It's a very streamlined process, so you don't have to like cold call your senator or anything like that. But nominations are usually due the beginning of your senior year.
One note I'd like to make on that, because I had a mentor, he was an Air Force Academy graduate when I was going through the application process. What he told me to do, and what I do think made a difference, was he told me to write my senators and congressmen letters. It doesn't even need to be a long letter or anything. It can be the same letter over and over again. But the more your name crosses their desk or their staff's desk, the better it is. That can help you out. And so if he knows he wants to go, have him start writing his senators and his congressmen letters just so that they see his name.
Yeah, I want to speak to the nomination process a little, again, that it's a little different. So think about a congressperson who represents you or a senator, and you're going to go to an academy as their candidate. They're kind of representing them. And so they're going to probably have a process. They're going to get people like Dwayne, me, Rich, Bob, Shelby to interview as a panel all of these candidates who are interested in going to these academies to represent them. And I think as these elected officials are going to be very interested in making sure that this person meets not only the academy standards, but isn't going to show up and leave after 2 weeks. Is going to see it through and bring some level of credibility to their political office. So that nomination process can be very different than just meeting admission standards. And that process will involve interviews, probably from a panel. And it's going to take a look at things that might not just be your standard college admissions types of things. Again, talking to different people down at the, in the fair itself, there are kids who are going to get nominations, and they're just keeping this as an option. It's not really what they're interested in necessarily. And we don't want that to be the process. It would be part of the interview panel to be like, no, we want the kid who, as soon as he gets his nomination, he's going and he's going to get it out. Any other questions? Got to be some. Who's going to win Army Navy this year? It didn't take you long to answer.
Going back to ROTC, can we speak to the commitments required thereafter?
Yeah. Okay, so if you do ROTC, they are going to pay for a 4-year degree. You will owe back 5 years of active duty service once you commission. The other thing too, I wanted to say, all of the branches are phenomenal choices. You're going to have a great time in all of them. It really is going to come down to where you want to live and what the deployments are going to be like, because that will vary across all the branches. So for Navy, obviously we're going to be coastal. If you don't like the beach, you probably don't want to look at the Navy, because that's where you're going. Yep, I was stationed in Naples, Italy, Key West, Florida, and San Diego. In 10 years of the Navy, I've never been on a ship. So the Navy is land, sea, and air. I know, I'm a fake sailor. So if you like more of the coastal, tropical kind of areas, you probably want to look Navy. And then our deployments are going to look a lot different from other branches as well. So I don't know if I should talk on that or if I should just pass it over to somebody else.
I'm going to pretend I'm a high schooler again and ask you guys. It freaked me out when I was flying. Cadets, so tell me about this honor code thing, because I hear people get kicked out all the time for tying their shoelaces wrong.
Yeah, no. If you don't know how to tie your shoes, you're gone. I'm just kidding. No, not actually. So the honor code is most of the service cadet, I believe Navy has one as well. It's a cadet will not lie, steal, cheat, nor tolerate anyone among us who does. It is worded differently depending on which service academy you're at. But basically what that means is that we take that stuff seriously. At West Point, it's called an honor board, honor committee. Is that if you were caught lying, stealing, cheating, or we have what's called the toleration clause, which is a debated topic, but the toleration clause is that or tolerate anyone among us who does. So if you're caught in any of those things, then there is punitive action. And the reason for that is because as future officers in the armed services, we're expected to live in an honorable way. We're expected to have that integrity, have that honesty, and they know that when we're in charge, like for us, doctrinally an infantry platoon is like 40 people about. If they put one of us in charge of 40 people and then we're going out there telling lies all the time, that's not good. People's lives are in your hand, or people's lives are in your hand. And so that's why they take that very seriously. But that's an aspect of character. Just like if that's a worry for you, look inside. Think, who would I want to be? You want to be a person of honor. And that's something that can be built. It's something that you can already have, or it's something that you can choose not to have. That's what I'd have to say on it.
Yeah, it's not meant to freak anyone out either. These are like pretty basic human virtues. Like, don't cheat on your tests, don't steal your classmates' stuff, and don't tell blatant lies or lie. Like, those are pretty normal human things that I hope everyone exhibits. And if you just are a good person, you don't really have to worry about that type of thing. They're not out getting people, right?
It's one of those things that, like, the academy is molding you to be this leader, and at the end of this, you should be like a better person than you came in. So if you're expecting to go to a college where you're going to find other people to somehow carry you through classes, or you don't want to work super hard, an academy it really isn't the place for you. I mean, if you're going to be tempted to take the shortcut on homework, or to cheat on a test, or to lie when somebody puts you in kind of a hard spot, again, the academy, they're going to hold you accountable. And that can look everything from, like, if you get into an honor board, sometimes we call it like a turn back, and you'll stay at the academy longer, either a semester or a year longer than the original 4 years. And they can also separate you on honor in the sense of, like, you will be kicked out. So again, it's not supposed to be like a terrifying, like, got you situation, but you're going to be held to a higher standard. And if you're looking at an academy, you just need to be prepared for that.
So especially if you guys are looking at the academies and ROTCs, you're going to be commissioning as an officer. So you're going to be in a leadership role automatically. So if you're supposed to be holding the people under you accountable for their actions, how can you be doing that if you're being a hypocrite and you're doing some of the things wrong that you're holding those people accountable for? So really good topic on that. I really like how you were very serious and motivational. And then he was like, it's not that serious, guys. Just be a good human being. Golden rule, right? I love that. The other thing I was going to say too, so as far as like duty stations stateside for Navy, it's like Hawaii, Cali, Florida, Texas, Virginia, overseas, Spain, Italy, Japan, Guam. Our deployments, we're going to places like Spain, Italy, Australia, Hong Kong, Dubai, Thailand, France, Greece, Portugal, Peru, places like that. They're actually pretty fun to go to. So again, all the branches are going to be great. So it really depends on what's going to be most important to you. If you want the travel aspect, if you want to be the boots on ground, or whatever it is that you're interested in, look into all the branches and see what's going to fit you personally best. Yes. He had a question if you wanted to.
For the ROTC scholarship, you mentioned the 200,000 or the 180,000. Is that evenly distributed from 1 year to the next among the 4 years, or is it, for instance, I've got kids in college, sometimes they're more expensive 1 year than another. So can you use the 200 different amounts per year, or is it 50K per year?
That's actually a really good question that the board never really gave me clarification on. I would assume that would be a conversation you would have with the ROTC school that you're applying for and say, hey, how does this $200,000 work? If a certain year is more expensive than another, how does this all pan out? The particular schools would know best on that question. But it is something that if you contact me later, I can reach out to the board and see if they'll give me an answer on that. Let me circle back to you on that one. Right. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Two different conversations, two different finance programs.
Right.
But the size, the scholarship
Yes. Yeah. Like when we offer that $200,000 scholarship, we're saying, hey, these are the test scores you need. This is the scholarship. This is what you're going to get in the end. And then as far as particulars, as far as your degree and, well, what if I want to go on to this after, or what about, this part with the finance? You'll definitely want to reach out to each school individually that you're interested in going to and see their answers to those questions.
Okay, so this is a question for you guys over there. What are the class sizes and basically like the relationship between students and professors? Just what's up with that?
So no, that's a really important thing going into a college that I didn't quite understand when I was applying. But at West Point, even the core classes that like all freshmen might take, your class is really never bigger than about 20 kids in a classroom. So you won't have those big lecture hall classes, which is
people in your English class?
no. West Point also really loves discussion-based classes. So even a history class where you're simultaneously learning from the professor, you're also like talking with your class. So anything over 20 would be not quite feasible for that. But with that, at least for me, my professors have always been really accessible. We have what we call additional instruction, or AI, which is like office hours at a normal college. And they're very open with their schedule, as in like their time during the day is for students. So if they're not teaching a class and you're struggling in something, they're more than willing to talk to you in their office about whatever you need covered. So especially for writing assignments, I get a lot of additional instruction just so I make sure I'm on the right track with whatever I'm doing. Or every once in a while you'll have like that one math lesson you didn't understand. They're more than willing to speak to you outside of class about it, and they'll reteach it to you if that's what you need. So I've had a really good experience on the academic side.
What about all right, I'll speak to the breakdown of what the instructors are. So you, at the academies, they're all slightly different, but you're gonna get both military instructors who are normally captains through colonels who went back for either a master's or PhD, and now they're returning and teaching whatever the specialty field they know is. But you also have civilian instructors, so you get a mix of both at the academies. And it kind of provides a unique perspective because you can talk to the civilian side of things, and then you can talk to the Army people and they tell you your war stories or whatever. Yeah. Right.
And this actually came up when I was talking to some people outside earlier. The concept of like TAs, people that go to civilian schools, they'll walk into a class and they'll never meet their professor. It's like just a TA teaching the whole time. That is a completely foreign concept to us. That's like one of the best parts, is that all of your instructors, one, it's such a low class size that they're all going to know your name and they're going to be like invested in you, but also they all like want to be there, which is really exciting. Like they're there not to somehow support their research that they actually care about, and they just like kind of have to teach a couple classes. They're there because they want to teach you, which is like, best word I can figure to describe it is it's dope. Like they just care a ton. And exactly. And so like you'll go in, I had also going back to like the span of people, I had a Catholic priest as a math teacher, which was interesting. His name was Father Costa. And in his class, he always had York peppermint patties in his office. And he was like, if we would go to see him just because he'd show up and he'd like tell you stories, and he was just like so invested that he just like loved to talk to us, and you could go in, have a York peppermint patty and just hang out. Like all the instructors are just so invested. And like at a lot of civilian colleges, you'll take a class and then you'll brain dump it after. Now, I can't say that never happens, but like I still actually like retain the stuff I learned my first year, because they put so much like emphasis into like actually teaching it discussion based, really practicing the material. It's a very good education overall.
They really do care about the education. The other thing I wanted to say too is, even though all of you that are considering these options are probably wicked smart students, if you ever come across a point in your journey where you don't know how to do something, it is completely okay to ask for help. They want you to succeed. So they would rather you swallow your pride and say, hey, I don't quite understand this, I need some extra help with this, than to struggle in a subject and get lower scores and stuff like that because you were too prideful to ask for help. So it is okay if you don't know everything. That's why you're in school.
I know when I went through many moons ago, I used to say it's hard to fail out of the academy. There are so many people that are looking out to make sure you're successful. Your professors, in each one of the companies, there are cadets dedicated to making sure that you're successful. Also, if they're studying the same major, there are so many resources available to you as a cadet. And if you don't cut it during the year, they also do they still have the summer term academic program where you get to go back in the summer and redo that class. So is it still hard to fail? I mean, is there still that level of support there? Yeah.
I will say though, the small class sizes make it harder to see the class stuff.
Yeah. You have to be prepared.
They're gonna ask you.
Oh, one thing I did want to mention, because we haven't talked about it yet, as far as the medical process. So there's something called the DOB-MERP that you'll have to go through if you want to go ROTC or any of the academies. So for the academies, they do it the smart way. You go through DOB-MERP first, because they're going to see if you're medically qualified before they have you do the rest of the stuff, whereas ROTC is kind of backwards. And they're like, hey, you got the scholarship, now let's see if you're qualified for it. So now I will tell you too, if they do deny your DOB-MERP medical, you can submit a waiver to have it reviewed again. So if they tell you no the first time, don't give up. Don't let anyone tell you no. Keep trying. And also, if you apply for the academies or ROTC in high school and you don't get it that first year, yes, you can still apply the next year. So the way that works for ROTCs is, let's say you graduate, you didn't get selected, and now you're a freshman in college. If you go to college that does not have an ROTC program, you would still work with someone like myself, who's a national scholarship coordinator, where you're applying for that 4-year scholarship. But if you go to a school that does have an ROTC program, you're going to apply directly through that unit, and it's going to be called a 2 or 3 year or sideload scholarship. So yes, it's not just the one and done and, oh man, I didn't get it and now you don't apply again. So you can apply multiple times. There are preparatory programs too for the academies and for ROTC. I know for a Naval Academy, it's NAPS. So if you've got kind of the rest of the package, but maybe you're struggling a little bit on the academics, there are preparatory programs to help you get those academic scores up. So yeah, I think there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot it. Yeah.
I have a question. I heard him talk about summer programs and pretending I'm that high schooler again. I'm going to have a cadet handle it and then Petty Officer Lowe handle it. What? I don't get my summers off? What's that all about?
All right. I think I can vouch on this because I've had a pretty good experience with the summer programs at West Point. So the first summer you come in, you do your basic training, or it's called Beast. All the academies have a similar thing. It's kind of your sucky one. But like at West Point, you learn how to do your fun stuff. So you go shoot, you qualify that, you throw a grenade, you play with grenade launchers, you learn how to kill each other, basically. All that fun stuff, right? You get yelled at a lot, you learn how to tie your shoes, that type of thing. Now, the following summer, you're going to have some free time. So you do, at West Point, CFT, which is the advanced thing, more advanced training than their first summer. Same type of thing there. You're shooting, running obstacle courses, you're running, you're walking around with a heavy backpack, that type of thing. You're having fun in the woods. After that, you have 2-ish months to do whatever you want, right? So that following month, I worked as a backcountry canoe guide in northern Maine through a program West Point sponsored. Great opportunity. I lived off the grid for a month. Really cool. Learned a lot. Other kids do a lot of things, like Landon has been to airborne school. That's something you can do in that time. She's been to air assault school. So there's some military training opportunities. It's the same through all the academies. There's cool internships, things like that. Now, the next summer, I did more stuff, running around the woods, shooting people. This time, it was, you actually got to command your peers. So I got to command 30 of my, kind of my buddies, and we would go attack another group of 30 of my buddies. And then, a lot of us would die, that, we learn lessons. It's a good time. After that, I also, I got my scuba certifications through West Point this summer. I went to Key Largo for about 2 weeks, got my advanced and basic open water certifications. And then I spent a month outside of Boston working at the Army's Physiology Research Center doing research. So I've had a pretty wide scoping range of opportunities. And that's pretty universal throughout the academies. You can do some pretty neat things. I don't know if any of you have done IADs that are cool like that.
Yeah. So just to make that sound a little bit more like official and give you all the weird acronyms and stuff, the 3 different summer programs that you'll have, there's MIADs, IADs, and PIADs. MIADs, that's those military schools. That's airborne school, that's air assault school. One thing that there's also advanced MIADs, which is like one that I'm going to be trying to go to military free fall or Halo school this next summer. If you guys have heard of that, there's also Sapper school, and there's CDQ, combat dive qualification course, which is combat dive. So there's like advanced MIADs that you can do there. And then IADS, that's academic summer programs. So that's like internships, working with companies, doing research, stuff like that. And then PIADS, the Key Largo, where he got his scuba cert, that was a PIAD, which is like a physical summer program. So a lot of times if you're on a sport, they'll consider your sport to be a PIAD. You're like summer training camp for that. And then there's also those programs like where you can go get your scuba cert, just different things like that. But all around, it's like a lot of opportunities. Yeah, your summer after your freshman year will probably be the most open, because there's, in terms of grad requirements, there's obviously BEAST, basic training, that you'll do before your freshman year. And then after your freshman year, you'll do CFT. And then the rest of the grad requirements is that you have to do a MIAD, IR to PIAD. You have to have at least one. They're possibly going to change that to where everybody has to have a MIAD. So everybody has to have a military school before they graduate. That might be a development. But then there's also CTLT and CLDT. CLDT is what he was talking about with how he went out in the woods and commanded a platoon of his buddies and went and fought other platoons of his buddies. That's CLDT. And then CTLT is where you'll go shadow an active duty second lieutenant for 2 weeks wherever you go. And usually you're able to put in preferences as to like what type of job you want to go shadow, and like what base you want to go to like shadow that second lieutenant. So that's going to be like kind of an overview of the summer programs.
So this past summer, I did the CTLT. So I went and shadowed a lieutenant. I was at Fort Riley, which is in Kansas. And I got to see a couple different branches, but it was really cool to see the operational Army, especially as someone who doesn't have a lot of military in my family. And I was a straight out of high school, like admit to West Point. I don't have a lot of context for what the Army actually looks like. So I think CTLT is one of the most important things we do over the summer. You can go some really cool places. Some kids were going to like Germany and Korea for Army bases, but just seeing the operational Army, I got to see the job I want to do and what it actually looks like in the Army, which was awesome. But summer training, a lot of the additional opportunities you get, like those internships and everything, is really based on what you're willing to chase and how hard you're willing to work for it. A lot of the internships kind of go through your major and things like that. So if you're willing to reach out to faculty and see what opportunities are out there, aerosol and airborne, you just put in preferences for things like that. And if you end up at an academy, I highly recommend just chasing everything you can do. Aerosol was not fun, but I am so glad I did it. It was something I wasn't sure if I could do it going in. And then on the backside, coming out, having the badge, it feels amazing. So the academy really provides you with funding and the connections for so many opportunities, but you do have to chase them. You got to work for them a little bit.
I know we're wrapping up on time here. So if you're interested in any of the ROTC, since I am the only ROTC rep here, I have my business cards with me. I'll leave them up here. If you need the ROTC rep for another branch, just take my card, shoot me a text, and I'll give that information to you.
Yeah, we are out of time, and I know we didn't give Shelby an opportunity to talk about what ROTC summers look like. So if you're interested in knowing that, it's a little different, but similar. Naval Academy, I think we can say, is very similar. You show up before your freshman year early. They have a different name for it. Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, from the standpoint of summer activities, your first summer after your plebe year, you'll serve on board a naval ship, and there could be a submarine as well, and you'll take the place of a enlisted man on board the ship. So you get ground experience working in the engineering department and operations combat information center on the bridge. You'll be standing watches, the mid watches from 12 to 4. So you're essentially a sailor. You'll also spend a summer with naval aviation, and you'll have the opportunity to fly jets down at naval training centers. For those of folks who are going to go in the Marine Corps, you'll spend a summer with the Marines down at Quantico, right alongside the folks who are going through OCS or Officers Basic School. And for those who decide they want to go in the Marine Corps, you'll go with five months of officer training after you graduate from the Naval Academy. If you go in the infantry, you get 2 more months of very highly intensive infantry combat training. And so that's the panel, you go in the Marines. And if when you graduate from the Naval Academy and if you go aboard ship, you're going to go aboard ship right away. You might get some advanced training, but for the most part, you're going to go and just become a surface warfare officer. All the other specialties are going to require additional training. Submarines, obviously aviation, intelligence, other military occupational specialties. And if you have any more questions, I'll be down there at the booth and we can answer them.
Thanks. So yeah, we're out of time. So thank you for coming. Look for any of us. We'll be down at the booth till the end of the fair. So again, thank you for coming.